All right, it is Tuesday, July 8th, and this is the Finance Committee for the City of Stoughton, and I will call us to order. Roll call. Is Tanya online? That's TW, I assume? Okay, so
Yeah, I'm here.
perfect. Everybody is here except for Adrian, who is unable to be here, so I can verify we have a quorum and we are certified to be in compliance with open meetings law. Public comment. Any public comments? Going once, going twice. No public comments. And so we will proceed into communications and presentations. And the first one is the pre-sale report for the promissory notes.
Good evening. I'm Greg Johnson from Ellers. I'll be going through the pre-sale report and the overview of the 2025 financing plan. There's a PowerPoint presentation that summarizes the formal pre-sale report that I'll use to kind of guide my comments this evening. So on the first page of the presentation is just an overview of the financing plan. This is really what kind of you need to know in terms of the general financial impact and purpose of the proposed notes. All the other pages in the presentation that I'll summarize kind of provide the detail of the particular financing plan summary here. So in terms of the 2025 projects, the total project cost being funded is approximately $13,076,000. The debt service will be repaid by several revenue sources, primarily the tax levy for debt service, but the stormwater utility revenue will pay their proportional share of the debt service, the EMS fund their share, and then the portion attributable to District Number 8 will be paid by revenues from that particular district. We always like to look at debt issuance in a multi-year context. So for illustration purposes, we've included future borrowings from 2026 to 2029 that include a combination of general capital improvement projects and some stormwater projects. So that totals an additional $35 million, but again, it's just there for illustration and planning purposes. In terms of the fiscal impact, we'll start with the debt service levy, kind of looking at that 5 years worth of planning. The debt service levy would increase about $105,000 per year, incorporating the 2025 projects being financed, and then those shown from 2026 through 2029 for illustration purposes. The stormwater utility, when we look at utilities to see their financial ability to support additional debt, we like to look at what's called a debt service coverage ratio. That takes the net revenues of the utility after you've paid all your operating expenses and compares them to the total debt service expenses. We like to see a coverage ratio of at least 1.0 to show that the net revenues are at least equal to debt. As you'll see when we get to the stormwater revenue coverage, we're really right at that minimum level based on 2024 net revenues. And then for TID District Number 8, the incremental value in that district as of January 1st of 2024 isn't sufficient to generate enough tax increment collections to support the existing debt that's already in place for the district and the portion of these notes that are attributable to TID 8. So the recommended solution for that will be to amend TID District Number 7 to allow it to donate revenues to TID District 8 to help support existing debt service and the debt service from these proposed notes. So in terms of the remainder of the presentation, we'll just kind of summarize the financial analysis. So on page 3 is your existing general obligation tax levy summary. So on the far left-hand column is your total principal and interest payments for each year. And then it shows the non-levy revenue sources that the city budgets to pay a portion of that debt service. So your levy for debt service for 2025 under the net tax levy column for this year's budget was approximately $5,390,000. You'll see that your existing tax levy is projected to decline going forward, which leaves room for these proposed notes in future capital borrowing. The next 2 pages are just a detailed listing of all the project costs that are funded with the 2025 notes. They're organized by department, so it consists of fire, EMS, IT, Parks and Recreation, planning, and then police, public works, roads, public works facilities, and TID District Number 8. So again, the total amount of project costs being funded is approximately $13,076,000. On page 6 of the presentation is just the placeholder dollar amounts that we've included in the multi-year financing plan for future capital projects. So there's some general capital projects and then some stormwater improvements identified for future years. So this is what we've used to just build out a multi-year financing plan for illustration purposes. On page 7 is the sources and uses for the proposed notes. The total amount of issuance cannot exceed $12,605,000. That's the total amount that is authorized to be borrowed. And then we just break down the portion of those notes that's attributable to the various departments. So fire, EMS, other police, streets, stormwater, and TID District Number 8. So we particularly allocate the debt for the EMS and stormwater and TID 8 so they can pay their respective share of the debt service. So the debt structure for each of the departments is kind of taking into account the useful life of the assets that are being financed. So the fire portion's amortized over 10 years, same with EMS. Kind of the other capital improvements, larger infrastructure projects amortized over 20 years. And then the police and some of the street portions are amortized at different periods depending on the useful life of the street improvement being financed. And then on page 10, you'll see the stormwater utility and the TID-A projects are amortized over 20 years to take into account the revenue streams from the stormwater utility and TID District Number 8. So on page 11 is the tax levy impact analysis. This includes your existing debt, the proposed 2025 notes, and then for illustration purposes, financings from 2026 out through 2029. So under the tax levy and tax rate all debt column off on the far right-hand side, you'll see under the debt service levy total net debt service, that is your projected levy going forward with proposed debt issuance from 2025 through 2029. So as I mentioned in the summary comments, the debt service levy would increase by about $105,000 per year during the planning period. Then you'll see that the levy is projected to decrease in 2031. That's to account for the end of the 5-year planning horizon. The next debt issuance in this cycle would be in 2030, which would hit the levy in 2031. So that's why we're building in a decrease into the levy to account for future debt issuance that's not accounted for in this model beyond 2029. And then in the abatements column, we show how much revenue would be needed from TID 8, the stormwater utility, and the EMS fund to support their proportional share of the debt. On page 12 is the analysis for that stormwater utility debt coverage ratio. As I mentioned, really the preferred minimum ratio is that would be at least 1.0 or higher. So you'll see you're kind of just above that amount in 2025 and 2026 with the proposed debt, but then factoring in debt over the next couple of years, you'll see that ratio kind of is right under that minimum 1.0 and kind of hovers at that amount for several years. So at a high level, this is just kind of an indication that probably time to revisit stormwater utility rates if the expectation is that the stormwater utility revenues would be sufficient to cover their share of debt service as shown in this plan. In terms of the state general obligation debt capacity limit, that cannot exceed 5% of the city's total equalized value. So at the end of fiscal year 2024, the beginning of this current year, the city was at about 49% of its statutory debt limit, which left you with $49 million of legal borrowing capacity. At the end of 2025, with these notes, we're projecting you'll be at about 55% of your debt limit. Looking at those future debt issuances, including out through 2029 for illustration purposes, projecting that you hit about 66% of your debt limit over the next couple of years, still leaving you in excess of $30 million of borrowing capacity. So just kind of shows where that's trending, taking into account future debt issuance over the next several years. The city has a policy metric regarding debt expense as a percent of your operating budget. That states that your levy and TIF supported debt service payments should not exceed 30% of all operating and debt service fund expenditures. Operating expenditures are defined as your governmental funds. So this shows with future debt issuance, including the 2025 through 2029 notes included in our multi-year planning model, that the city is below that not to exceed metric of 30%. In terms of TID District number 8, there's presently about $940,000 of general obligation debt already outstanding. These notes would add an additional $995,000. The current incremental value of the district is $3.6 million. As I mentioned, the likely solution would be to allow TID 7 to donate excess increment to TID 8 to support these project costs. So absent that occurring and or additional growth in TID 8 to support additional costs, that TID 8 debt service would have to be picked up by some other revenue source. So to just kind of illustrate TID 7's ability to support donations to TID 8, on page 16 is the cash flow projection for TID 7. This is kind of conservative to just again show that the revenues could be sufficient to support existing TID 8 debt and then these proposed notes. So we just show the revenues going forward with really no significant changes in your tax increment collection. And then on page 17 is all the expenditures, and you'll see highlighted in a box is what would be needed to be proposed to donate to TID District 8 just to support existing and proposed debt. And so on page 16 is just a very detailed cash flow projection for TID District number 8 that shows existing debt, the proposed debt service from these 2025 notes, that revenue stream from TID 7 would be needed to allow the district to recover its existing debt and these proposed notes by 2044. So in terms of the resolution that will be on the agenda for the Common Council this evening, it's what's called a parameters resolution. What that does is it establishes certain financial benchmarks that have to be established in order for the bond sale to be awarded. The parameters resolution identifies specific positions that are allowed to accept the sale results on behalf of the city as long as the financial benchmarks are met. So first is the TIC, or the true interest cost. That cannot exceed 4.47%. That is the true interest cost that we are showing in this financial model. So what that means is that the debt service cannot be any higher than what we're showing you in this proposed plan. There's some other bidding parameters that we established for the underwriters in terms of how we can adjust maturities once we get the sale results in. But again, it's a not to exceed borrowing amount and a true interest cost that cannot be exceeded. So in terms of where we go from here, this is kind of the beginning of the debt issuance process. In terms of the proposed timeline on page 20, the beginning is where we're at tonight, consideration of the parameters resolution for the 2025 notes. We would look to schedule a rating call, likely the week of July 28th. Tentatively scheduling the sale for August 12th. It'll definitely be that week. We'll see how busy the sale calendar is. You usually try the benefit of a parameters resolution is we can adjust the sale date to kind of get it on a calendar when there isn't as much competition. And then the estimated closing date is August 28th. That is the date that the city would receive the funds. So that's the overview of the financing plan, the multi-year model that we've built out just to kind of account for some future debt issuance and the impact of this financing on the stormwater utility in TID District number 8. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Just one right off the top. These projections I assume you're not taking into account any potential future revenue from TID 8. You're using today's value, correct?
Yes, yeah. I think when you're issuing debt and you have existing debt and then you're looking at supporting additional debt, we'd like to be able to kind of show what's needed under that worst case scenario, because while there's certainly opportunities and likelihood that additional development could occur within TID 8, it could also result in some additional cost. And so we'd like to kind of have a plan to approach it if nothing else really changes, and also really like to demonstrate that to the rating agencies as well, so they know we're not counting on something that may or may not occur to support the debt payments.
Thank you.
And we do anticipate some additional debt for TID 8. I don't know if it's been defined yet. We did receive a TIF request for TID 8 yesterday. We really haven't even had time to really analyze it yet, but that we're making progress on the redevelopment site, so that's good news for TID 8.
Anybody else have questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
You were right. You were able to get through that pretty quick. All right. Next one is scope of engagement letter from Quarles and Brady. Did I pronounce that right?
You did. Yes, that is the city's bond council, so they're part of this whole debt issuance process. This has been provided to you in the past, just for full disclosure purposes. It just lays out what they're doing, what the fees are, things like that.
All right. Any questions on that? All right, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from 6/24. Hopefully everybody got a chance to review them. I would be open to a motion. Okay, moved by Ozzy. Second by Brett. Any questions, amendments, changes? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
I'll abstain.
All right. The approval motion passes. And we will now move on to reports. So, tax incremental district compiled financial statements. Lisa.
So in addition to the annual audit, the auditors provide this financial statements specifically for the TIDs. It does provide a little bit more detail than what is in the city's audit. And we just use this to help compile the TID annual reports. So it's just basically what happened throughout the year, broken down into more detailed information. And it just specifically identifies the debts and the municipal revenue obligations and things like that. So it's really just informational.
Brett?
Lisa, I saw there's a gap in we have these on the website in finance department, but there's a gap between 22 and now. Could we get this report and 23 added into that area on finance website?
Yep, we can add that.
Great. I'd actually like to see it. I know there's 4 buttons in there for different things that you can look into, financials and reports and audits and otherwise. I'd like to see the TIDs brought up forward as a button on there so that it would be easier for anybody looking for them to get. Otherwise it's about 6 clicks in order to get to them. So if those could be brought a little bit more forward, so anybody that might be interested in seeing them, because I mean some of these have good success stories in them, some of them are struggling, but I want that to be transparent for everybody to be able to see that.
Okay, we can make some updates.
Great, thanks.
Lisa, did you have a question? Okay. Anybody else? All right, we'll move on to item number 8. This is a resolution, and I gotta get to it here. All right, this is a resolution authorizing issuance. This is the general obligation promissory notes that we talked about. Did anyone have questions on this? Comments, concerns?
I'll move to
Motions?
recommend to council.
Second.
All right, moved by Brett, seconded by Lisa. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we will recommend that to council. Excuse me. Next one is significantly smaller in fiscal impact. This resolution is to amend the 2025 CIP budget for EMS water heater emergency purchase. And I'll do it in the right order this time. I'll take any motions.
Anybody have any description of this one? Well, was it just that it failed straight out? Is that it?
Yeah, it looked like
I
it
can
failed.
comment if you'd like.
Great.
Sure.
Yep, sorry. So yeah, this was a commercial water heater at the EMS station, if you will, and it went out, and we had to make an emergency purchase to get them hot water, obviously for hygiene, to wash gear, clothing, and things like that. So we worked with finance, and we did have some money in another project at the fire station that was under budget. And so we're proposing to shift those funds from the fire in-floor boiler system to purchase this water heater. It was relatively straightforward.
All right, thanks for
Thank
the
you.
explanation, and we'll move to approve,
All
or
right.
not approve, recommend.
All
Second.
right. Motion by Brett, second by Lisa. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we will recommend that to council. Item 10 is also a budget amendment to CIP budget for Rotary Park Bioretention Pond Project, and to enter into an agreement with R&T Vaguely LLC of Monroe. This looks like it is conversion, basically converting a wet stormwater retention pond at Rotary Park over here to bioretention, and we're going to move some money from a different project as well.
Yep, I can take this one as well if you'd like.
Go for it.
So as you mentioned, this is at Rotary Park, right by the fire station. So we're proposing to eliminate the wet pond and move to a bioretention basin, which in effect is a rain garden that filters stormwater runoff. So we'll no longer have a wet pond in that area. And so we'll be putting a series of plugs in there in the bottom of the basin, and then make it a little bit more appealing, also safer in this area, which is adjacent to a park. So to do so, it is a little bit more expensive than the rehab that we're going to do, but after going through the engineering and thinking about the location, we went to, or Tony took this to Park and Rec, which they recommended moving to a bioretention basin months ago. So we began the design on that, and it was a little bit more expensive, but we did find some money in another project that was under budget. So we're looking at taking about $38,000 from the hard pipe swale in Industrial Circle and move that over to the Rotary Park pond rehab project. Any questions on this project?
Brett, how's that water moved in and out of that pond?
Yeah, so it's actually, there's a storm sewer that there's an outfall into the basin, and then there's an under drain underneath the engineered soil that carries it out of the basin into the storm sewer and eventually to the Yahara.
So that was designed that it would always have more or less a constant level in it? Or at least no more than?
Yeah, so it for the most part, it's going to be dry, a dry basin.
The current
So
one,
during a
right?
rain event, I'm sorry.
I'm talking about the current one.
Oh yeah, there's a static level there. However, during drought periods, it does go below that static period or the static level. The current pond was built, I believe, in the early, maybe they're around the 90s or something like that. I take that back, in the early 2000s with the fire station. However, there was not a safety shelf constructed with that, so it's really not up to current standards. So obviously having this opportunity, we looked at different options, and the bioretention basin was the best option for this location, the safest, the most aesthetically pleasing. So we felt like this was a good choice for the city to move forward with.
And then, formulate my question here quick. Will that require any filling in of it to, because if we do get large rain events in the future, is that going to really fill back up, or are you doing something to reset that static level?
So there will be some fill into the pond, and there is under drains. Obviously, if we get a heavy rainfall, there will be some water that's held until it can percolate into the system. But for the most part, during normal rain events, it's going to be dry.
Okay.
And there, of course, with these types of things, there is maintenance involved, which we're fully on board to do. We're already looking at planning for maintenance in the future as we have more and more basins coming online and more dry basins coming online as well. Not necessarily bioretention basins, but infiltration basins that do take maintenance. So we're actively preparing to take care of these basins.
All right, thanks. I think I'm done with my water questions for.
Forget your fill.
No, never.
And I'll put on my Regina hat. These are going to be native plantings.
Yes, yep. And Lisa had a good question earlier today. I emailed her. Basically, there's a list of approved plugs that the contractor can choose from, and then plant those plugs within the basin. There's certain spacings that they have to have with these plugs, and so there is an approved list that they have to choose from.
I'll probably butcher their name a second time. Have we worked with Vaguely before?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. They're typically a subcontractor of the prime contractors that we work with, but they have done lots of work in the city.
Lisa.
Just one thing to clarify. So will they put in a variety then, as opposed to choosing one and putting all of the same variety? And maybe that's in the document somewhere and I
Yeah.
just didn't pay attention to it.
Yeah, it's in the spec language, and as I told you earlier too, it's like 200 pages long. But there is a variety that they have to choose from those. I think there's like 6 from each of those columns or something like that, or 12 from each column that I sent you. So they do have to select a variety from different columns in the chart. That I know I'm just talking to Lisa right now, but there's a chart that they have in the spec book. And they have to choose a certain amount from each column to create that variety.
Yeah, I guess part of the reason I was asking is, you know, the dry basin in Magnolia Springs is full of black-eyed Susan, which is great, but there's not a variety. So hopefully going forward, there'll be a requirement, whether that's through Public Works, you know, that they have to put in a variety as opposed to one species. So, but that's great.
I think that's why we put that chart in there, is to create that variety that you have to select fall from this column and fall from this next column and so on to create that variety. So you can't just take the cheapest, most readily available plant and put that in there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none. We had the motion in second, right? Okay. I'd be open to a motion.
I'd make the motion to recommend approval of the council.
Okay, motion by Lisa. Second by Ozzy. Any last questions? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 And any opposed? All right, we will recommend that to council.
Thank you.
So we have blasted through our agenda. Future agenda items, we have October 14th, the operating budget will be presented. And then dates to be determined for investment review proposal, affordable housing, fund use options, various TID conversations, referendum questions. And then here's the information, Lisa, about CIP meetings. Anything that, Lisa, you feel like we need to add, or committee members, we feel like
No,
we
I
need
think
to add?
mostly it's just gonna be the budget, and the budget was passed and signed by the governor last week. Yeah, it went really quickly at the end. We think there's some things in there that will help us. Obviously, we're always looking for more, but Lisa and I were both on a webinar today, getting a summary from our lobbyists so we could better understand it. So kind of the more you hear it, the more you know where to look to find out, and we can plug in our numbers. But it feels like it's better than the last biennium budget was as far as municipalities. There was some things that we were hoping for more of. So one of the examples is, you might recall in the last budget, they put in supplemental shared revenue. And so for this year, our amount went up 2.3%. They had a 4.1% number in there for next year, but they decided to scale that back so they could give tax credit relief for like utility bills and things like that. So it was at our expense that they helped the taxpayers, is the way we looked at it. But we are also hearing that the transportation aid might be better funded and possibly even the shared ride, but we don't know to what extent yet. So those are the types of things that the finance department team will be going through here in the next several weeks. I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
No, I think you did a good summary of what we've heard today. So we'll just keep watching and update you as we know information.
Lisa?
There may be a future agenda item related to landmarks. Those of you who were on finance, I think it was a couple years ago. So one of the challenges with landmarks that Lisa's involved with now is that the project gets approved, you know, we get X number of dollars, 15, 20,000. The project gets approved, and then I think they have a year to complete it, but then sometimes they ask for an extension. So the money that Landmarks assumed is just kind of sitting in a savings, you know, getting bigger, actually has to be, you know, reallocated and all those things that we understand from finance. And then to complicate it, Michael Stacy left, so we had a new person come in. I was no longer on Landmark, so it kind of got lost again about how do we communicate at the end of the year, and should we necessarily approve these extensions for people, you know, because sometimes they want another. It's a year and then they want more, so it really gets messy. So I think we're going to have a conversation at Landmarks this week about what we can do, and then, you know, maybe there needs to be some sort of process that makes it less complicated for both the people getting the money and the finance department. So that's kind of my understanding, that it was maybe coming back to finance at one point, or
After talking with staff, they were going to make maybe an adjustment to how this is handled when these are awarded and when they have to be used, and not extending it, and if they don't finish it in 1 year, then have to reapply, looking to keep it in a year. So doing the application process in the beginning of the year, giving them till the end of the year. If they don't use it, then they would have to reapply next year. More streamlining that process and not doing this carryover and this 6-month extension, and then not knowing that we still have this money to give, but we only have this much, and now we've allocated all of this money, but we still had a 6-month extension for this other money. So we're looking at a better process.
Yeah, and I would just add, as Lisa said, we did at Landmarks change the timelines and the deadlines to earlier in the year instead of later in the spring. That way the bids could be submitted, or the quotes, to the homeowners or business owners like during the winter. And then the money, I think, was allocated maybe in April instead of September or something. I don't remember the exact dates. But you're right, if it's not spent, we have to carry it over. From my recollection, nothing really got lost in the process. I think there was a perception that money did. At the end of the day, we just need to do a budget amendment at the end of the year if the money's not spent, if there's an intent on that project finishing. Landmarks, I think, can take what they started and maybe tighten that up a little bit more and try to encourage people to have shovel-ready projects and have the contractor lined up and ready to go. I don't know how you do that in this market. It's very difficult. So I'm not really sure where they're at, but what I would say is if they're not going to get the projects done, to let Lisa's team know so they can prepare the budget amendment and carry that money over into next year if that's what needs to be done. It takes a 2/3 vote to do that at the council.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is just being more proactive and asking, do you have a contractor? I mean, sometimes it comes up because they want to know that the person is competent to do the work, but I don't know if they have a schedule necessarily. I don't know that we've been asking that routinely, and I'm just back on Landmarks this go around, so I'm kind of getting up to speed on what's been going on. And then I believe it has to be, then they send back pictures of the work and make sure that it's appropriate and approved before they actually get the money. So that delays things a little bit too, potentially, because they don't want to award it. We had a situation where they didn't do the work that was expected. It didn't meet the guidelines, and so they didn't end up getting that money. So we don't want to just give them the money either, but it's another thing that adds that other layer in timeline. So I just think it's one of those things that we just have to coordinate, as you said, and I think we're getting there, but a little more tightening up, I think.
All right, I guess I got one last thing while I was sitting thinking about stuff. I know that, or based on our geo debt that we're going to issue out, you know, I know that we have plenty that are stacked up in the past, and they get buried down in the financial reports and that. But I think it'd also be nice to see like a little snapshot of where those amounts are and what their retirement dates are, and as we're retiring some debt out. I think Damon used to show us reports of that every once in a while. Just because we're kind of creeping up a little bit more in our borrowing. I know we're not even close to our borrowing limit, but because we're getting into an area that we haven't been in a while with borrowing, I think maybe there could be some anxieties raised about that. So if we're showing, like, you know, here's where these debts are going to fall off in what years.
Anything else for the good of the cause?
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn from Brett.
Second.
Second by Ozzy. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.